If nothing else, it is evident that while we have contending views and divergent views among citizens in this country, as you should have in any healthy and fledgling democracy, we are able to have the views contend, and although some persons exhibit a degree of exuberance and do things that are inappropriate, in the main, we had an incident-free protest by JFJ yesterday, and persons who elected to wear blue went about their business. They donned the color blue. We saluted the JCF. We stood in solidarity with them, and the show went on. The show went on. That is a credit to Jamaica's democracy. Our fine democratic traditions are on display. And yet again, we have come away the better for what transpired yesterday. Now, there are those who are framing the calls for persons to stand in solidarity with the JCF as a fighting down of JFJ. And I'm here this morning to set the record straight and address a number of things, a crocus bag of things. Jamaicans for Justice is a human rights advocacy group. Jamaica is a democratic society. Responsible and well-thinking Jamaicans like myself understand, recognize, and appreciate the work of JFJ. We appreciate advocacy aimed at sensitizing the public and drawing attention to human rights issues and calling for accountability mechanisms that serve to safeguard and protect the rights of citizens of Jamaica. Any sensible smaddy would appreciate that. Appreciating JFJ's work and being a sensible smaddy does not mean, however, that you are not able to draw attention to an issue and indeed critique JFJ if you consider the critique to be merited. Where am I going with this? About 3 or so weeks ago, I was commuting to this very space, New Start 93 FM, to do this very program, when I heard JFJ's Michael Jackson, their executive director, on the radio with another station in Radioland. And they were having a discussion about this planned protest action that the JFJ was organizing, dubbed End Police Violence. Now let's be very clear. The thrust and the basis of the protest action was basically what JFJ dubbed concerning and alarming levels of police killings since the start of the year. At present, the latest number I have is that there have been 106 police fatal shootings or police killings since the start of calendar year 2025. And when I heard Michael Jackson in conversation 3 or so weeks ago, imploring persons to come out in support of the JFJ's protest and wear black and whatnot, I paused and certain thoughts came to my mind. One of the first things that came to my mind is this. The term police killings, listeners, or police fatal shootings is a term that has been and is being weaponized and exploited. Because the truth of the matter is that you have two kinds of killings. You have lawful killings and you have unlawful killings. I want the public to understand that. So let me go again. A killing by the police falls in either of two categories. It is either a lawful killing or an unlawful killing. But guess what? The word killing is a negative word. It conjures up certain things in one's mind. When you hear the term police killing, immediately you think of it in the negative, or some among us are inclined to think of it in the negative. It suggests that the police is engaging in police excess. That's what it conjures up, certainly in the mind of some people. And I believe JFJ is aware of that, and it is something upon which they play. The 106 people who have been killed since the start of 2025 may well be 106 people killed justifiably. I want us to understand that. So it bears repeating. The 106 persons who have been killed by the police since the start of this year may well be 106 persons who were justifiably killed. And so, we know that in relation to a number of these 106 killings, there are divergent accounts of the events. So let us interrogate that a bit. In the main, whenever a killing ensues, you will hear the police proffering an account of the event, the version, the police's version of what happened. They went in pursuit of somebody. The person was not being cooperative. In fact, the person elected to open fire on the police. The police returned the fire. Person was struck. Person was killed. The police retrieved XYZ weapon. That's typically the police's version of events. And then you have another version of events from time to time, because every so often we hear witnesses, purported witnesses, yes, indicating that what actually happened was X, Y, and Z. In other words, you have a variance between the police's account and the account of alleged witnesses. Yeah? And so that is instructive. The police say X and a set of persons that say Y. And we know that two separate things cannot simultaneously be true. A woman cannot be pregnant and unpregnant at the same time. No, so? Mutually exclusive. So if police say X and a witness say Y, we know that something are going on, sir, because two diametrically opposing things in many instances, because that's what happens when you listen to the different versions of events, cannot be simultaneously be true. How do we address that? Listeners, there is a well-established and appropriate mechanism to establish that. Jamaica is a democratic society. Michael Jackson, other JFJ workers and supporters and advocates, their network, yes, are fully seized of that. So if a police killing is contested, the ultimate arbiters of that may be our court of law, a tribunal of fact, where evidence is marshaled, yes, and consequent on the marshalling of evidence and what is adduced at trial, a determination is made either by a judge or by a jury. Yes? There was a time here in Jamaica when we had the police investigating itself, and it ended there. Consequent on the advocacy and the work of many, JFJ included, and indeed the vision of former Prime Minister, the JLP's Oret Bruce Golding, we have had an entity established, the Independent Commission of Investigations, INDECOM. INDECOM is essentially tasked with undertaking investigations regarding interactions with the public by the police and the public's complaints or allegations. INDECOM has the power to secure statements and exhibits in terms of evidentiary material, and consequent on INDECOM's investigations, a referral is made. INDECOM makes a recommendation to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and the DPP, in circumstances where they find that there is a charge or a case to answer to, they advance prosecutorial action. So a policeman may find himself before the courts on a charge of murder, for example. In other words, extrajudicial killing. That, listeners, is due process. That is how a mechanism is supposed to work. It should not be that the persons who position themselves and declare themselves to be champions of human rights and human rights advocates are at the same time taking positions and espousing views that conflict with due process. Here you are, JFJ, Michael Jackson, calling for accountability, calling for professionalism, calling for due process on the part of police personnel. But you receive reports regarding police killings and you come down on a certain side. What about the human rights of the police? Is the police not entitled to the presumption of innocence? What of the human rights of the police? To make the matter a bit clearer, because what you have, listeners, is a case of do as I say, not as I do. You see it all the time in society. It's a level of hypocrisy. Yeah? Do as I say, but not as I do. You are a human rights organization. The police must operate professionally, and they must adhere to due process, and they must be accountable. But you can't even subscribe to and adhere to due process because you are being preemptive to conclude that a police killing is problematic, or to conclude that a police killing constitutes police excess. Yeah, because that's what you get when you listen to the narrative of JFJ. In fact, listeners, I heard a clip from the protest yesterday where one of the chants was, "Can't broke the law to uphold the law. Can't broke the law to uphold the law." So what you're contending, Michael Jackson, JFJ, and this is not an attack on JFJ, or tearing down JFJ. This is a sober and honest critique of JFJ. I am highlighting a deficiency, and me highlighting a deficiency in JFJ and the discharge of its work should not be construed as essentially fighting against JFJ. JFJ has its role to play. But I had a problem, listeners, with the basis on which JFJ sought to take to the streets and undertake this protest action. Because you're saying 106 persons have lost their lives since the start of 2025. Police killings since the start of the year, JFJ contends, have been at levels that are concerning. And you have a chant that says, can't break the law to uphold the law. Now, are you a tribunal of fact, Michael Jackson? Is JFJ a tribunal of fact? Is JFJ in the come? Yeah? On what basis have you concluded that in respect of these 106 police killings, the law has been broken? That is not a determination for you to make. And you can wibble and weave, yeah? You can put out nice sounding utterances, but the truth of the matter is that we have heard the protesters in very, very clear terms. And the protesters were, of course, being egged on by you. And these would have been your words too. Can't break the law to uphold the law. How do you rid the police of their constitutional rights? Their right to the presumption of innocence and their right to due process and all of that. They enjoy the presumption of innocence. So how are you concluding that these 106 police killings are essentially unlawful? I started out my commentary by indicating to the listeners that there are two types of police killings, two types of any killing, lawful and unlawful. If a man pounces on you, you have a right to self-defense, whether you're a police or a civilian. If a person pounces on you, you have a right to self-defense. So you may elect to take the person's life in defending yourself, or be a sitting duck and allow the person to kill you. Anyway, we run to the break and come back with more here on Straight Up. Do stay with us.